Hello everyone, this is Neo. Welcome back to part 2 to our follower series. We're going to begin by making our follower. So to begin, we're going to make a character 2D, body 2D. We'll rename this to follower. This will be our base for our follower. And we're going to add a sprite. Next, we're going to add a collision shape. Then we'll add an animation player. We'll add an animation tree separately when we make an inherited scene of this scene here. And then we're going to add an area 2D. We'll call this one enemy detector. Then we'll add a collision. And then we'll add a marker 2D. We'll call this our pivot. Under this, we'll want to add an area 2D again with a collision. And this will be called our attack box. Add a raycast 2D. And we're going to call this one our player collision. And then lastly, we're going to add a node. This will be node 2D. And we're going to call this our menu anchor, which I mentioned in our previous episode. So we're going to save this as follower. This will be our follower base. So next, we're gonna want to go under our script and we'll add a script, follower.gd. We'll begin by adding some export variables. Then we'll have health set to an integer, which is equal to 4. We'll also want to add this. We'll also do the same thing here, just to improve performance. Okay, so I'll explain a couple of the variables because it will be important to know what they do. Radius limit is going to determine how far the NPC will want to be from the player. If the player is outside of this limit, then the NPC is going to follow the player until it's at a comfortable distance. You can adjust this differently. This is a pretty far away distance for the NPC to idle at. And then we have radius squared, which is going to check later, which we'll be using a Pythagorean theorem to determine the distance from the player. And we're doing the same for our enemies. And we also have is following, which is set to false. This is going to be changed when we go into our NPC menu and we select the certain options. So when we ask the follower to follow, then is following is set to true. Enemy detected, we will determine that if it enters the enemy detector. Then we'll have our enemy referenced here. And then lastly, we're going to have an enumeration state machine. So we're going to have an idle, an attack, a chase, and a follow. So the idle is going to, idle, and it's going to check in case there's an enemy coming in or if the player is too far. Attack will attack the enemy if it's too close. Chase will chase the enemy but not the player. This will be prioritized over following the player if there's an enemy entering the enemy detector. And lastly, the follow. If there's no enemy around, then the NPC is going to follow the player until it reaches a certain radius limit, and it's going to go back to the idle state. So we'll continue. We're going to do signal enemy attacked, and then we'll begin with our physics process. Here we're just checking in case the movement of the NPC is at 0. Otherwise, we are going to set our knockback direction, and we're also going to set our playback. So now we'll begin by matching our states. So our follower state is going to be very self-explanatory. We're going to have a function called check player distance. This will specialize in checking the player's distance. And if we have the player within our distance, it'll give back a true or false statement. So if true, then it will travel to idle and it will not do anything. Else, it's going to go to follow. And once again, it'll always constantly be checking if player's in the distance. If not, then it's going to go to follow until it eventually goes to the player. Else, oh, correct, I forgot to add if is following to make sure that if we are following the player, that we have all these conditions met. Else, we're going to set our animation back to idle again. Next, we're going to do our attack. Now, we're going to check if the enemy is not null, because otherwise we will revert back to our idle. Next, we're going to do check enemy distance. We'll put enemy. And we're going to do move and slide. And then we're going to do animation tree.get. We can just copy this here. We're going to go to attack. Made it a little error. We're supposed to do if, because it'll be returning a true or false. So if true, it's going to move and slide and then go to attack. Else, it is going to go to chase. Else, which will be checking if the enemy is null, then it'll just go back to its idle. So current state will be equal to follower state dot idle. Next, we're gonna go to follower state or chase. So if enemy is null, then enemy detected will be set back to false. This is going to check in case the enemy dies. So if the enemy dies, it automatically becomes a null. And it's going to check during the chase. If it disappears, then it's going to stop seeing that the enemy is detected. So if enemy distance, if check enemy distance returns true, current state is equal to follower state dot attack. Else, it's going to accelerate towards point. We'll add enemy and then delta. We'll add move and slide. And then we'll just get our run animation in. Then we'll go to our follower state. If not, check player distance. So if the return statement is false, we're going to just copy and paste this and change this from enemy to player. Else, we're going to go back to a follower state and change it to idle. Okay, now we'll actually add these functions that we've been using throughout the states. So our parameter here is going to be player, and we're going to do the following. So for this function, it's going to check the distance from the NPC's current position and the player's position. So if the distance of the player is less than or equal to the radius squared, which is our limit, then it's going to stop moving. Otherwise, or in this case, return true. Otherwise, it's going to return false. We're making it set to where we're using the Pythagorean theorem, and then we're going to set the target position, which is where the actual arrow of the raycast points. Set it to the position of the player minus the global position, as to make sure that the pointing is actually going to be pointing to the player and not to a global position. And if the raycast collides, we check this through this function, then we return true. So we can copy and then paste this and do it for the enemy. The reason why we don't use a general function for both the enemy and the player is because certain parts of this, which for example is this, do not use the raycast. The enemy function does not use the raycast to check the distance of the enemy. So here we're just checking if the limit is reached inside of our enemy's box, or from the position of the follower to the enemy. If so, then we're in distance to attack, and then we attack the enemy. Otherwise, we're going to return a false statement, and we're going to continue chasing the enemy. Next, we're going to add accelerate towards point. We already have this in different programs here, or different parts of our code here, so you can just copy and paste it. And then for our incapacitated function, we're going to just print follower has been incapacitated. Feel free to do anything for the health, but for this part of the video, we're not going to be doing anything for the health. So for the next part, we're going to be connecting some signals. We'll first do some area entered for our enemy detector. So for the area entered, we're going to check if area is in group enemy. If this is true, then we're going to do enemy is equal to area.getParent. This will be grabbing the area that is attacking that is inside of the detector. It's going to get its parent, which is going to be our enemy. Then it's going to say the enemy is detected is equal to true. And then our current state is going to be chase. Next, we're going to do area exited. So we're going to check if the enemy has exited. If area, well, we can copy and paste this. Then we're going to set enemy detected to false because the enemy just left. And current state is equal to idle. Follower state will be .idle. So this will automatically be checking for anything happening. I made a typo here in case you were copying me. Make sure it's check player distance instead of checker, as I did by accident. Same here. And there we go. Next, we're going to do a scene inherited using this scene, new inherited scene, open, and we'll call this one our night. Save it. Save as night. And I'll add some sprites for this NPC. So the sprite I'm using here is incomplete. However, I might add more frames to it later, more specifically the attack frames. I'm just going to be using it for the walk cycle, but for the attack animations, there will be no actual animation. So for our night, we're going to add an animation tree. And then we're going to want to add our event trigger. Wrong one. Event trigger. There we go. And we'll have an editable children, so we'll be able to add our shape. So first, we're going to want to drag in our PNG. And in this case, we have 32 frames. For collision, we'll add a small sphere. For our enemy detector, we'll add another sphere. Our attack box will be a capsule, and this one will be facing down. You can change the length of the target position. Well, actually, no, you won't need to, because it's going to automatically change around a certain perimeter. And finally, we're going to want to add a event trigger, which will allow the NPC to be interacted with. So for this part, we're just going to be adding animations. So we're going to want to be adding an idle, walk, and then an attack animation for all 4 directions. And then we'll be adding them into our animation tree, which I'll show you shortly. Before we move on to our animation tree, make sure your walking animations all have this symbol turned on, which will add animation looping. So we'll begin by going to our animation tree. We're going to choose node state machine. We'll choose our animation player, and we'll set active on. Well, after we finish. So first we're going to add a blend space 2D. We'll call this one idle. And we will begin by adding our animations. Our first animation will be idle up here. Then idle right. Then idle down. And then idle left. Make sure the blend is set to these dots instead of a straight line. We'll do the same thing for our attack and our running animation. Now just to connect them. So we're going to start off with our start, which will automatically go to our idle. But you're just going to want to set every single one of the advancements over to enabled. Next, we're going to go to our world, and we will add our follower, in this case our knight. Make sure you save here first. I'm going to remove the knight and re-add him. There we go. Now we have our most recently updated knight. Save there. Before we do anything else, we're going to want to go back to our knight and then enable our state machine. So make sure that under our enemy, our base enemy, we're going to add group enemy. And then for our orc, which will just go under boss template, we're going to also want to make sure we set this to enemy. So if you're having issues with up and down attacks with this NPC, I recommend you just switch around these two attack states from the opposite. I'm really not too sure why Godot causes this. It might be an issue on my end or on the engine's end, but usually it's a problem that causes the NPC to attack the opposite direction of where the enemy is. I forgot to add, before we do any testing, we're going to go under our knight and we're going to go attack box, and we will add a body entered function. And here we're just going to copy this part and then add the following. So if the body is in the group enemy, we're going to get the parent and get its knockback. So we're going to apply the knockback that the enemy has with our knockback direction and our knockback strength. I'm going to get our parent again, and this time for its health, and then we're going to minus equals it with our attack power. And then we're going to leave it at that. Make sure this is body and not area, like I accidentally did. Under our follower template, we're going to want to go down to our attack box, go under node, then to groups, and add in our melee. Otherwise, our enemy will not receive any damage or knockback from the follower. So to make sure that our system works properly, make sure that you have is following disabled automatically. And under our event trigger, which is this thing here, we're going to go under our GD script, and we're going to add this condition: if getParent.getNode menu anchor .getChild, we're getting the first child of our menu anchor, and we're checking to see if there is none. Then we will instance. This is to make sure that we do not accidentally instance too many children of the NPC menu. So we load it into our game. I'm going to choose warrior. We're going to go down to our NPC. You'll notice our NPC does not follow us, but when we go up to him and we ask him to follow, then he can begin attacking, and when we're out of his range, we'll begin to have him follow us around. And if we dismiss him, he will go on to attack this enemy, but he's not going to follow us anymore. And if we exit, we no longer have the menu. So I encountered a small bug before I end this video. You're going to want to get rid of getParent here and here, because we're already getting our reference from the body. So we'll already be getting the reference of the enemy, and we do not need to get the parent. Thank you all for following along with this series. it has come to my attention that we have almost reached 1,000 subscribers. So I'd like to thank everybody for reaching this goal. It is quite a lot of subscribers, and I never would have thought we would have gotten this far. So thank you everyone for your support and for watching along with the series. I do plan on releasing more content around this series, but also in the future going to create new series on different types of games. Otherwise, I'm Neo, and thank you for watching.